Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Today I am returning to Wretched and Todd Friel and a video about the latest evangelical fad that he dislikes. I do these ministry reactions from time to time because I think it illustrates some of the problems that the church and ministry and everything else has. But more than that, as a former minister, I kind of like to look at things as now an atheist, and I like to keep my pulse on what evangelical Christianity is doing. Is there anything that atheists should be concerned about with this current fad trend among evangelicals? I always think is a good question to ask. So let's let Todd introduce the topic and see what's alarming to him about it. Take it away, Todd.
Hey, just what we need. A new evangelical trend. And you say, wait, are you suggesting evangelicals are trendy? No, I'm saying that definitively. We have science to back it up. Let's take a little trip down evangelical memory lane, shall we? Gentlemen, start your engine! The prayer of Jabez, Bible man, experiencing God, wild at heart, WDJD bracelets, purity rings, I kiss dating goodbye, the case for Christ, the purpose-driven life, the passion of the Christ, the the five love languages, heavenly tourism books, blue like jazz. I'm second, the love dare, God's not dead, the circle maker, crazy love, soul surfer, the harbinger, Jesus calling. I think we've established the fact. Evangelicals love fads, and it seems like we're seeing another fad that I wish weren't a fad. Not because I don't want this fad to be reality, but I fear this fad is mostly counterfeit. You say, what's the fad?
Wow, that was a great trip down memory lane for some of us former evangelicals, wasn't it? I don't think it was that much of a thing for Todd to prove that evangelicals are trending. It's kind of what the church has to do to stay relevant in an ever-changing world. Not that the whole of the church, including what he believes, has adapted over the centuries to remain influential. Even he has. These fads are part of life, and one of the things in the evangelical world are often altered knockoffs of things in the real world, repackaging and remarketed to Christians. But we're here to talk about the current fad or trend in evangelicalism, so let's stop waffling and get on with it.
Revivals. It started over a year ago with the Asbury revival on a university campus, remember? Apparently spread to other campuses. Claims that hundreds of kids, thousands of kids getting saved. We want that, don't we? We genuinely want to see revival sweep the land like in the days of the first and second Great Awakenings, but I fear what we're seeing these days is more like a Charles Finney revival back to the middle of the 19th century. He was a heretic. What? But he was also a manipulator. Some of the stuff he preached as a touring evangelist was like, whoa, fiery good stuff. But he wasn't after conversion and regeneration. He was after moral transformation. What did he use to get people stirred up? Manipulation. He used enthusiasm. He created the anxious bench, which was the precursor to the modern day altar call. Come, if you're anxious, come on down, make a decision for Jesus. Now start behaving better.
Oh, so we're going to talk about a recurring fad in Christian circles, revivals. I don't know if that's so much as a fad as something that regularly props up from time to time in a lot of evangelical, different types of denominations. You know, I kind of got nostalgic there when I saw Asbury's campus, seeing I used to walk by those buildings every day on my way to the seminary as I'd walk by the college. So it's not a surprise to me that Asbury's heritage has a big element of revivalism on the campus. In fact, some of my professors at the seminary had been part of some of those revivals in the 70s and so on and so forth. So it's not a new thing. The whole Ichthus celebration is right there too. So, or was, I'm not sure anymore. But that whole idea of revival, spirituality, having good music, all that stuff is right there. Todd desires the results of the first and second Great Awakenings. He says so. Yeah, we need to have that in Americans past because people are getting saved. Todd thinks it's great, but what are some of the problems? What's the issue? Well, then he starts to throw shade on Charles Finney in the fact that he calls him a heretic and a manipulator. I don't know about the heretic part, as one man's heretic is often another man's prophet. Pentecostals I know, for instance, look to Finney as a great revivalist and would throw shade at Todd for not having the full gospel like he did. But the biggest contradiction in Todd's analysis is his desire to see something like the first or second Great Awakenings, but then decries the absolute central figure of the second Great Awakening, Charles Finney. So Todd then makes a distinction between conversion and moral transformation. But if one is converted, are they not going to have a moral transformation? Todd is misrepresenting Finney here. Having read Charles Finney's some of his works and seen records of some of his sermons, I think that Todd makes a little bit of a misinterpretation of what Finney was actually after. What Finney considered a genuine conversion was one that would lead to that moral transformation. Todd isn't relating the genuine beliefs of Charles Finney here, but he does the same to atheists and any other group of people he deems unfit or not genuinely Christian, so pretty normal BS from Todd. It wasn't make a decision for Jesus and start behaving better. If you do make a genuine decision to be a follower of Christ, then the Holy Spirit will transform you and you will behave better. Yeah, he was looking at moral transformation as a sign that genuine conversion had taken place. That was Finney's view, and Todd kind of gets this wrong.
Now, his preaching, while fiery and some of it good, was not gospel-centered. But I will say this, at least the revivals were based on preaching. The modern-day revivals, you know what they're based on? Music. But they both have the same modus operandi. Enthuse people, manipulate people. Music is massive when it comes to these revivals that we're seeing kind of all over the place. University of Oklahoma, Lee University, Florida State University, Texas A&M. Look, we really do want kids to be saved. But if the kids are merely being enthused into making a decision, then we aren't really seeing revival. We're seeing Finneyism 2.0.
So the big problem of this fad of revivals is the music. That the music is used to emotionally manipulate people to conversion. I actually agree with Todd on this one. These revivals are emotionally manipulative. And having sat through many past Pentecostal revivals, services back in the day, I would say that he's right on. A lot of that stuff when I was still with the AOG was emotional and heart-stirring instead of head-oriented. It was about personal relationships, so emotions are part of a personal relationship and so part of a relationship with Christ. That kind of ministry is emotional and emotionally manipulative, and that is part of it inherently.
Another big massive revival, it's called Gather 25, supposedly reaching 2.5 billion people to spark revival. Now, how are they going to ignite that spark? With 25 hours of worship music, not preaching, music, music, music. And all of these events, they resemble Finney revivals, not because they're preaching, but they're getting people into an emotional state. And through worship, and you maybe think, well, who cares as long as they get saved? Well, we should care because we want to do things biblically, and we do want kids to be saved. I truly do. But when music is center stage and preaching is just sort of an add-on, hey, we're going to get back to worship, but real quick, let me just tell you that, and we downplay preaching, we should be concerned that we're going to see the same results as Charles Finney. What were his results? Well, after he finished touring around the country. Reports returned to HQ. The people who made a profession of faith were actually acting worse since they've been saved, presumably. So some individuals decided, well, we got to go figure out what happened here. So these circuit riders were dispatched to investigate, and they discovered that the supposed converts were, as they called them, cold coal. They made a false profession of faith, and now their latter end is worse than the first, and their hearts are hard, and no matter what they tried to do to stir them and ignite them again, no success. Any circuit came to be known as the burned over district.
At this point, Todd gives a fairly accurate account of the post-Finney Second Great Awakening results, but that's the way the gospel is by its nature. I would say this is to be expected. It actually is something that happens a lot in Christianity in general, in the individual lives of Christians in particular. People accept Christianity of all stripes, are enthused about it, and then they move on to something else. The gospel itself tends to lend itself to this. Well, I'm going to heaven now. I got my ticket punched for the gospel ship. No worries. Once saved, always doctrines that contribute to this attitude. No, of course, people like Todd will come along and talk about false conversions, and as a long term isn't right as far as the results. But I would challenge Todd to give me a revival situation that wasn't emotionally based in the first place and thus had long-term lasting results. Now, his big beef seems to be the use of music instead of preaching as the main vehicle for these revivals. I suppose that would be my concern as well as an atheist, because it is damn effective in getting people to be emotionally attached to their faith. But to Todd, this is going to get the same results as Charles Finney, so it's bad. He wants genuine converts, and this kind of thing isn't going to get them in his mind. But I think he is wrong, because in the end of the day, in faith, far more emotional attachment is involved in any version of Christianity than actually believing the tenets of the faith, or accepting what Todd considers to be the true gospel. But what is his solution? Let's find out.
Now we're starting to see revivals on university campuses and beach baptisms. There's another trend. They're in Tampa, Texas, California, what's being called a summer of baptisms. And truly, I really do hope people are getting saved. But if music is being used to emote people into the water, then we should be concerned. So there's a test and a challenge simultaneously to see if these are genuine revivals. Do revivals. If you're an organizer of a revival, I say go for it. But here's my challenge. Leave the instruments at home. In fact, try this. No singing whatsoever. Or if you're going to do some singing, treat it the way that typically these revivals treat preaching. Hey, we're going to get back to the preaching, but real quick, let's just sing this song. What would happen if music were removed from all of these revivals and preaching were the centerpiece? Because that's what we see in the Bible. Jonah didn't go to Nineveh with a band and a 3-hour set of music from Hillsong. The 12 disciples were not the 12 musicians, the backing band, the emotive band to get ready so that Jesus could walk out and, just do a little bit of preaching. In fact, Jesus commanded the disciples to preach. Jesus esteemed preaching as the preeminent task of the evangelist. All preached, and people got saved without a single synthesizer creating the mood. My contention, if today's revivals had zero music, I suspect they would have zero people attend and zero people getting baptized. In fact, I suspect that could be true of far too many contemporary churches. They're built on manipulative music. You pull the plug on the music, and we'll see if today's revivals are genuine or if they're just creating more cold coal. Discuss.
I get the viewpoint, as I used to have it when I was a preacher myself, that if we reverse the preaching of the music, would the results be the same? As an atheist, I would now say that preaching is just as manipulative, because the gospel is inherently manipulative. It's a sales pitch. I contend that if Jesus actually existed and spoke the words of those sermons that he spoke, and this was true, he is also a master emotional manipulator. Jesus' preaching is apocalyptic. It's designed to bring about fear of the end of the world. It's used to create the emotions that has the most highly emotionally manipulative factor, perhaps the highest, fear. The whole gospel message preached from the Bible starts with God's judgment against sin is severe. Your sin is going to permanently cause you to have problems in eternity, i.e. you're going to burn forever. That's manipulation by fear. Sorry, Todd, it seems to me that your chief concern is that they are being manipulated by positive emotions such as love and feeling good instead of the negative ones like fear and that leads to some sort of quote unquote genuine repentance. I've heard you say that you need to hear the gospel thundered by a man of God. How is that not emotional and thus manipulative? Leads to my last point as a former preacher myself. If you don't inject emotion into your preaching, people are not going to respond at all. People like my preaching when I pull at their hearts. People tend to follow preachers that they emotionally resonate with. That is true of yours as well, Todd. People who are emotionally in need of the adrenaline through fear rush and a crisis flock to your type of preaching. They always have to have a personal crisis in order to feel alive. And so your package of fear hell, so therefore repent, is going to appeal to that kind of person who's going to keep that on an emotional high all the time. What kind of people are you creating with that other than people emotionally attached to your version of faith through fear? My point is this: preaching is just as emotionally manipulative as music because both of these are inherently emotionally manipulative. Now that we are done with Todd, I need to ask the question, though, about revivals from the atheist standpoint. Is this something that atheists should be concerned about? Yes, because of the aforementioned Great Awakenings. What I mean by that is there's been several moments in American history where people may not have experienced a Great Awakening, but there was a revival of religious fervor in the country. And more people became more and more religious, had more emotion about their religion, and wanted to do things in the name of that religion in politics. Now, at present, we have Christian nationalism, but I think it's very well counterbalanced by people against it. But what would happen if some of the people in the middle suddenly become religiously, well, a little bit more zealous for their faith? What would happen to people that if people decide, hey, we need to get back to God? I've seen this several times in the history of America where people either have these great awakenings or these revival times where religion becomes more something to the forefront, belief in God and that sort of thing. This never ends well for society because people that aren't part of it, usually because of the emotions of pushing from the people that are part of it, it leads to a tribalistic pushback and people need, suddenly find themselves at the business end of religion again. That part where religion, starts to look more and more like the past, where we should remember what it was like in the past, that Christianity was no different than what Islam is today in the past. It had the same, going after people for the same reasons. My constant continual understanding of things, because passion rules reason as a general rule, in my opinion, that people will become passionate about faith again, and that will actually strengthen the Christian nationalist position because people will want to say, we need to make this a godly nation again. And then you'll have this revival or great awakening behind that idea, and that will change society, and that will change laws, it will change a lot of things. A lot of people have noted that the right seems to be winning a lot more, and I think they're correct on that. Probably through the 90s and the early millennium, liberalism was making some great strides, but now there's a counterbalance to that, and it's starting to get more and more forefront. These kind of revivals that have been happening in the last 2 years do cause me a little bit concerned. They're not all that big. They're not all, everywhere across the country. As you notice from his list of universities experiencing these revivals, a lot of them are in the South. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that anybody else is safe from this sort of thing. As religious fervor grows, it tends to get involved in politics because religion and government are two bedfellows that have been together almost since the beginning. And that's a very deep, concerning thing for me as an atheist, because what usually happens when religion gets control, people like me become pushed aside. We become ostracized. We can't normalize atheism and deconversion from faith if people suddenly say that's not normal and that's not wrong, and then make it legally so. So that's always my concern in front of me when it comes to these revivals. Having studied Great Awakenings, I've seen the effect that they have in culture. When the Second Great Awakening hit, it was after the American Revolution, and a lot of the founding fathers were gone, and the country was facing kind of an identity crisis, and the religious people came along and gave it a Christian identity, which it really didn't have before. It had been a secular nation before that and run on secular principles, and in particular Enlightenment secular principles, and it did very well. But a lot of things that they decried at that time were the rise of prostitution, alcoholism, things like that. I mean, let's be honest, Americans have always been about alcohol. If you want a good time, find an American and say, hey, where's the drinks? And he'll usually generally provide. It's probably one of our great contributions to the worldwide society. But that said, it was causing a lot of problems, prostitution, drunkenness, domestic problems, broken marriages, broken homes, on a practical sense, if not a legal sense. And so a lot of people felt the answer to those problems was religiosity. What needed to be probably done from a secular point of view at that point was to start looking at these problems from a secular point of view, what's really going on here, and start applying some of the things that we were learning at the time to the actual problem. I think the religious fervor actually probably slowed down America's societal development by 50 years because of the Second Great Awakening. It pushed back, and then we had to push back again and move forward again. And we are always in danger of that in the United States. We're always in danger of the religious zealots taking over. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Christianity. It could be Islam or any number of other religions that could come into that place. Revivalism is a danger to atheists because it leads to fervor that leads to action against us. And it's why I have something I just want to bring up at this point that is a danger to us. So, I'd be interested in your thoughts in the comments, so thanks for doing that. But I do have my concerns about revivals every time I see them prop up, because is this going to be the one that leads to a bunch of religious fervor again, and people are going to reject, common sense ideas, things that move forward, science, other things, where we're just going to throw those off and go back to the Bible? It is a constant worry for me. So, just something to think about and something to keep an eye on at present, but we'll see what happens. So, comment away. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and we have to think about Todd here, other than as always, he has that self-righteous smugness about him, like he's allowed to be the judge of everybody else's Christianity. It's always kind of bothersome to me, but, he is what he is. So, there's that. I want to thank everybody for stopping by. You can support the channel in a lot of ways in our mission to normalize atheism and deconversion from faith. You can support this channel directly through PayPal or Super Thanks or Super Chat if you're on a Premiere. You can also become a member of the channel. That's probably the best way to support the channel because it gives a steady income stream so I can continue the work that I'm doing, which I'm very grateful for. In fact, at this point, I want to give a shout out to my members, to my citizens, to my Rabyd citizens, to my Tribunes. Thank you once again for your support. You guys really motivate me to do better and better work, and the more support I get, the more I try to do better and better things. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. So you want to take all your time, money, and opportunities to give them to yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.